Well, welcome everybody, and thank you all for coming this afternoon. Today, I would like to talk about something that I think we all share in common. And I'm just going to throw something out there. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Margaret Gray. She's a friend of mine, a very great astrologer, and I consider her to be a relationship goddess. And she starts a relationship uh, uh, talks with a question. She asks the audience, she says, "Who finds relationships easy?" Well, guess what? Nobody has ever raised their hand. So we're all kind of in the same boat here, working with this. It's the ground zero of why we're here, what we have, where we have to work on ourselves, what we have to work on. This is the field. This is what we came here to do, and this is where it all gets played out. The reason I'm talking about this today is because on Saturday morning, I think it's Saturday in Australia. Linda, correct me if I'm wrong. Venus and Mars will conjoin in the sign of Virgo at 4 degrees. And this is the beginning of a 2-year cycle. It happens every 2 years. And it marks the beginning of a new cycle of all of our relationships, not just our lovers and friends. But we'll get into that as we move along here. So I want to talk about Eros. I think Eros probably has different meanings or lots of meanings for everybody. It's a pretty heavily charged word. Um, but mythologically, there is more than one god who holds this name. Generally, we think of Cupid. We think of a little cherubic character with his little bows and arrows, and he flies around with his wings and he does the bidding of Aphrodite. Well, this is not the Eros that I want to talk about today. What I want to talk about is the Eros, who we know is the primordial god of procreation. Now, we have to recognize that there are a number of cosmogonies. There's, not just among the Greeks, but every tradition, every culture has a creation myth. And the Greeks perhaps have more than many. There are 3 basic cosmogonies among the Greek mythologies. Homer had a story to tell as to how the world was created. Hesiod, in his hegemony, in his cosmogony, also wrote about how he believed that the earth was formed. But what we're looking at here was Orpheus, and these are the Orphics, and this is how they saw it. It's interesting to note that all of the creation myths, especially the Greeks, are very, very similar. They talk about basic elemental principles like air, water, sky, earth. So we're dealing, obviously on a very elemental level as everything comes together, and most of them also begin with the concept of chaos, that something came out of nothing. This is the ex nihilo belief that out of nothing something emerged. But I'm going to work today with this Orphic version of the mythology. And basically what we have is that this was a god who was born at the dawn of creation. In this version, necessity and time, Ananke and Kronos, basically encircled the cosmic egg which had been formed out of the void. And they split it into its constituent parts of earth and heaven, sea, and form the ordered universe. Now, the Orphics actually named this god Phanes, which was also Eros, which means love or desire. And he was a primal being hatched from the world egg. And then Ananke and Kronos, this is Kronos on the This is Kronos on the outside here, and this is necessity. This is Ananke. I gave you this second little image here because this is what's happening in the center. That necessity is wound around the cosmic egg, and Saturn is spinning time around it. And this is what drives the rotations of the heavens and the eternal passage of time. What Eros really defines and brings into play is the core attraction, the core magnetism, the core connective energy of the cosmos, of what brings everything together. We recognize, and we'll see later in the story today, that Venus we see as magnetism. But Venus's magnetism comes from this core primordial need to connect. It relates to atomic fission. It covers everything that we know about in science, everything in the natural world, everything in the metaphysical world as well, in terms of the way that things and people and events and everything is basically in a magnetic, etheric web where we are all interconnected, and there's a natural attraction between it all. And this is what Eros is that attraction itself. Obviously, it becomes a lot more in human expression, but this works also, in the chemical world, the plant world, the animal world. It's not just confined to human experience. So these are some of the basic core facts of what this transit's about. It will ingress, the conjunction will perfect actually on 24th, which is Saturday, 1:05 Eastern time, at 4 degrees 7 minutes of Virgo. And this is the third and last conjunction in Virgo. And it really emphasizes the importance of Virgo itself as a sign through which these planets move. I have here, we can see that this is where it moves, where we'll move ahead in the next 10 years, the conjunctions, the cycles that will be coming up. And it's only again in Aquarius where we're going to see, multiple, well, in Capricorn, we're going to see multiple repetitions, but we don't see the triple repetition, in quite some time. So this Virgo transit is really quite intense and quite constructive. Everybody's probably seen this design before. This is the computer imagery based on 7 orbits between Venus and Mars and what it looks like graphically. And basically it goes point to point, back and forth, and that's what each of these points corresponds to. Excuse me. So how do we view Venus? She has many faces. We have many ways of understanding her dynamics, her archetypes. She's the goddess of relationship, of love, beauty, pleasure, procreation. We know her by many different names: Inanna, Astarte, Ishtar, Hathor, Aphrodite. She's our closest planetary neighbor. And the astronomy is kind of important here because this embodies a sensual intimacy. We have an intimacy with Venus as in our inner, she's the inner planet between us and the sun, the nearest inner planet to us. So it's an intimacy that touches our body, mind, and spirit just by her closeness and her proximity to us. And the fact that she is on the inside, she's on the inferior direction, the inward direction from Earth to Sun. We know the story that she was born from the sea foam, Uranus's genitals castrated by Kronos, thrown into the ocean, and from that sea foam she emerged. We also understand her from her adulterous affair with Eros, her arranged husband Hephaestus, who was partially lame and not the most attractive individual in the pantheon, was often, she was drawn to many other liaisons, and Eros was really her closest lover, and she was caught in bed with him. Hephaestus, who was the goddess of the forge and could make fine jewelry, worked with gold and metals. He fashioned a very, very fine mesh net of gold, and when the lovers were entwined, he threw the net over them, and they were captured, and everybody was able. They were exposed. Everybody was able to see what was going on. Obviously, there were many mixed responses to that event. But it shows that with all her divinity, um, fidelity was not necessarily, at the forefront of her dynamic. She also had a great love for Adonis and Anchises, and with I think its actually name is pronounced Anchises, and Anchises and Aphrodite actually brought to the world Aeneas, who was one of the great Greek heroes. And the Judgment of Paris, which perhaps is also one of the most famous stories, where the golden apple was thrown into the field of Aphrodite, Hera, Juno, and who am I leaving out here? Pallas. And Aphrodite won because she literally was the fairest. Paris chose her, and as a result, he was given Helen as his bride in marriage, and Helen, who was the wife of Agamemnon, and which completely set off the Trojan War. She is the anima. She is the feminine dynamic. One of the two basic gender polarities in the world, and she also represents the anima mundi, the world soul. She is part of the tripartite of many of the feminine goddesses: the maiden, Mother Crone, and as I said, she's magnetism. She is the frequency that corresponds to our self-worth, self-love quotient. The invisible energetic vibe that we broadcast 7/24 that really shows up in the second house in Taurus. It really has to do with our relationship with ourself, and that quotient, that frequency, is something that we carry with us, and it's really this is the law of attraction. She has rulership of the two signs. As I said, the yin, inwardly directed rulership is in Taurus, which is our relationship with ourself. It becomes our self-worth, what we value, which in turn become our priorities. And then the outwardly directed yang, Libra expression, it actually becomes the projection of that magnetic frequency of who and what we attract through all of our seventh house dynamics. Mars is the nearest direction outwards, in the superior direction outward towards the outer transpersonal planets. So, just his position in the sky also exhibits and manifests as a very yang kind of expression, where it's very outward and aggressive. If Eros was the Greek god of war, and he was very violent, forceful, savage, bloodlust. There weren't a lot of redeeming qualities in terms of the quality of his character. He was quite a violent archetype. The Roman Mars was a little bit toned down because he was more of a guardian. Yes, he was a protector and an avenger, but that was only as a guardian for the community. He was full of valor and courage, and he was more of a keeper of the peace. And it was about maintaining the boundaries. We know that Rome was always expanding their boundaries, so obviously the army became very important in terms of that protection. So is it surprising that Mars is the color of blood? It's basically, it runs deep. Mars has two rulerships of two signs as well. He, in the outwardly directed fire sign of Aries, he expresses as our core instinct. Traditional astrology likes to describe the first house and the ascendant and our Martian energy as a projection, as something that we put out there with some kind of cognitive understanding. It's not. It's totally instinctive. There's no real cognition about it. It just comes from our gut. It's a very knee-jerk kind of behavior. It's purely instinctual. It's the seventh house, which actually becomes the projection. It's what we project, onto other people for what we see into that opposition, that polarity. And he's also the lower octave of Pluto. And up until 1930, when Pluto was discovered, he was the traditional ruler of the sign of Scorpio. So he rules both signs. And I often, look at both rulerships, when looking at a chart, because both of them are active. We, even as an evolutionary astrologer, maybe this is a bit blasphemous, I still have to, respect some of these older teachings and just, investigate it and look to see, what's going on there. He's our conscious choices according to Venus's values and priorities and Jupiter's beliefs. He responds to Pluto's subconscious soul desires. He is the lower octave of Pluto, where Pluto's the higher octave of Mars from that perspective. They're both about desire, but one is totally subconscious. We may or may not be aware of all of them. As we become more aware of ourselves, they certainly reveal themselves. And the Mars, are we as perhaps can be even less conscious of our conscious choices, because they're so instinctively knee-jerk that they're very automatic. We do them without even thinking. But this is the process that goes on. But Mars will act according to Pluto's deepest needs for security. If our need in the world is materiality, then Mars is going to pursue a material lifetime. If our need in this lifetime is to feel the security of being connected to everything around us and to source and to knowing that we are part of all that is, then our conscious choices are going to be directed towards more spiritual pursuits, and I think we'll have more spiritual adventures. Generative Mars correlates to the self-actualizing life force that initializes at birth and drives us forward. The Aries and Mars dynamic principle archetype is the first of the fire triad, and it is where spirit comes into form, where spirit comes into to be embodied. But I personally see the first house more as the energetic body. It's the second house to me, which is really the physical body in Taurus and Venus and Earth. But that's just my opinion. So the cycle of Venus and Mars, our singular purpose is self-awareness. We're here to grow. We're here to catalyze growth, and we're here to really understand ourselves, learn about ourselves. The soul incarnates time after time. Perhaps time is an illusion. Maybe it's all happening at once. That's another whole discussion. In order to understand itself, in order to grow at a soul level, and we are helping that out. Down here, boots on the ground in time and space. Kind of sending all the data back. It correlates to how we are self-actualizing through relationship. And, relationship is ground zero. It's no coincidence that the glyph for Venus looks like a hand mirror. We see ourselves in our relationships with everybody, even if, I should say we should see ourselves in our relationships with everybody. They are there, and it's all being projected back at us. Most often what happens is that shadow or that bit of ourselves that is hidden from us, we project onto somebody else. We push that out into the seventh house, and we say, well, that's you. You're doing that. But really, it's us that's drawing it out. That's part of that equation. That's part of that magnetism, that Eros, if you would, that is bringing that combination of dynamics together so that it can be worked out. It's how it happens. It's the Aries Libra polarity is the core archetype of the opposition. And what happens in oppositions is that we need to pull in somebody else to help us see, what it is that we're doing. We cannot work out the oppositions or the squares on our own. We by default will pull in another individual, and will manifest circumstances and just create situations where that whole drama becomes real, and we can see it. It doesn't happen when without other people. It's quite these relationships are quite important. We can't grow without them. It's our reflection. So Virgo is obviously another whole in some cases can of worms to people. Virgo is can be a difficult archetype. I can speak for that very directly because I have Virgo rising in my chart. But it's ruled by the planet Mercury, and it correlates to our intellect and to our cognition and our perception and basically to our intellectual understanding. works through two signs. So come back to that in a minute, I guess. I'm getting ahead of my story. But this is Mercury's yin expression. Our gaze turns inward. We become self-observant. We self-examine, and sometimes we self-condemn. Virgo polarity and its Pisces polarity, the 6th and 12th houses, are threshold archetypes, and they correlate to a liminal, to the space in between. You know, everything from Aries to Leo, from the 1st house to the 6th house, is personal. It's about us. It's about being born. It's about survival. It's about how we communicate. It's about how we see ourselves, and it's about how we project our selves in the world. We get to the 6th house, all of a sudden we recognize that there's other people out there too. We're not quite in relationship yet, but we have become aware that we're not alone, and it's not just about us. And that 6th house is the transition, from self to into the social sphere. It's the last of the personal archetypes. The Virgo archetype defines the quincunx, if you would. It's that 150 degree aspect that is a challenge, that needs a course correction. And in Virgo, it becomes growth through crisis, where we encounter ourselves. Virgo, Leo is so full of themselves that a pinprick could burst them. Virgo is the morning after. Leo goes to the party, flirts with everybody, perhaps wakes up the next morning. Here's some Eros. Wakes up the next morning, in some bed. They don't know where they are. They don't even know who that other person is, even. There's all this guilt and regret, and all of a sudden starts to pile in. That's Virgo. It's that morning after kind of feeling. What the hell did I do? But the purpose of it is to grow, because unless we feel that angst, unless we see that contrast between who it is that we're intending to be and the kinds of choices we're making alternatively, instinctively, not really thinking about it, that's when these things kind of show up. We measure and compare ourselves. We're preparing to be in relationship. When we get to that 7th house, we need to be polished up a little bit. We need to have some of our rough edges, scrubbed off, and so that we can get along with other people and not just be about us and for us and with us. We need to do other things. At the bottom here, this is something that I realized, and I think it really, really works, this mathematical thing. Leo is greater than, Virgo is less than, and Libra is equal to. And this is the way the second quadrant of the chart plays out. So I want to look here at this is the actual chart for Saturday. And as I said, the cycle of Venus and Mars correlates directly to how we're actualizing through relationship. It's ground zero. These events, these cycles are the timing, if you would. It's understanding the Kairos cycle, the right time to be making choices, to be looking at things, to be able to take some remedial action, and to be able to work with this and be in sync with the cosmos, if you would. And that's what's happening here. Oops. What happened there? Something's not right. No. There we go. So I'm trying to move some of these things around. So we've got a mutual reception between the Sun and Mercury. Mercury's in Leo, Sun is in Virgo. So they're really, there's a nice blending here. They're both direct, which is very good. However, we have Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and Chiron. I apologize, I don't have a glyph for Chiron to use. All retrograde. Everything from Saturn, everything from Chiron out is pretty much, not the trans-Neptunians, but everything from Chiron out to Pluto is currently retrograde. So this is going to be held in suspension, if you would, for the entire 2-year time of this cycle. We're going to carry this retrograde motion through it. We're rebuilding. We're rebuilding sustainable structures, even as things are being torn down. It's this huge. It's almost like the wheel of fortune. We can feel the wheel turning. Things are being slumped off at the bottom and rising up again at the top. We can actually see the process. It's pretty interesting. So I've marked out these are all the aspects to the conjunction itself, and this is what I want to address here. There's a lot going on in the chart, but I really want to focus on the dynamics of Mars and Venus themselves. So we've got a trine from a pretty close trine from Uranus. We have a separating trine from an applying trine from Eros. We have a very tight inconjunct from Chiron. We have 2 sesqui-squares from this stellium down here, Saturn, the south node, and Pluto. And then we have an exact square from Ceres. So this dynamic here, and this is basically about these three, this is about commitment. We have Juno, responsibility, Saturn, to values and priorities, Venus, and authenticity, Uranus. The work, Virgo, begins with ourselves and then extends to others. So with Venus and Mars under the beams, we might feel that something's occulted or obscured. This is a Hellenistic concept. And again, I've kind of looked back at, some other things. We have the responsibility, I think, to discern for ourselves and to vet, a lot of the techniques and some of the work that has come before us, and decide for ourselves, what works, what doesn't work. Under the beams is something I've have been exploring. The Cassini, the idea of the sun being within 15 degrees of any planet is called under the beams. That, in other words, the light, the heat, and the light and the radiance from the sun is so intense that anything within 15 degrees is obscured or is occulted or is made less than. And what that does is it brings this notion of something secret going on, something that's hidden, something that's really hasn't been seen or isn't being seen. Interestingly enough, and again, this is another whole topic of discussion, this is the chart for Washington, D.C., for the United States. And this is all taking place in the 10th house. And I'll just kind of leave that to everybody's imagination. So the Saturn-Pluto South Node here says, when we're willing to take responsibility, which, again, is a very Saturn Capricorn word for our choices and actions as Venus and Mars, we realize that perhaps we're the cause of our wounds. In Virgo, we want to know why, and we want to seek and apply the remedy. And the reason I say, why we're the cause of our own wounds is because we have Chiron in Aries retrograde, also making this really tight, challenging aspect to the conjunction. So we're both the wounder and the wounded. How much of our wounded is self-inflicted? I would suggest that most of the wounds that we experience are in one way or another self-inflicted. Sometimes things come out of the blue. Maybe it's a past life or something. We don't know. We can't have the answers, and we can't set ourselves up that we have to know the why and the source of everything that happens. But it's all energy, being resolved. And when we feel wounds from another person, or when the world itself or circumstances seem to wound us, I'd say that the circumstantial stuff are the choices that we've made, and the relationship stuff is something that we at some point in time, and again, time is a big word, has come back to haunt us in some way. So I really am seeing this Chiron Aries transit very much about self-wounding. Um, the Ceres, Ceres is our greatest personal loss. Demeter, Persephone were the iconic mother-daughter. They traveled the fields every day, creating all the abundance and fertility, for the entire planet. And the loss for Demeter was beyond measure. It comes to being for us the same type of dynamic, where something that we couldn't imagine losing is gone. We're pretty much a world in crisis, and every part of the country, wherever, whatever news you listen to, I don't care if it's, North America, South America, Asia, Europe, it's happening everywhere. We're seeing these losses in things that we consider to be essential, whether it's equality or fairness or humanity or any kind of just basic human understanding and love. It's really love that's that's suffering, and that's what we're losing. The world seems to be losing love, and I say seems because there's a Talmudic proverb that says that man plans and God laughs, and I kind of hold on to that and repeat it to myself every morning. That's how I get through my day. So this is a challenging time, and we're seeing a lot of constructive challenges, if you would. We're seeing things that are popping up that are showing us and telling us that where the work can be done, and we don't have to go looking too hard for it. It's pretty much going to be in our faces. The moon is in Gemini. It's also the ruler of the North Node. So the path forward here is healing and growth through reconnection to self, and self is soul, by observing our own reflection in others and seeing their reflection in us. When we really, get that objectivity, and when we really can get outside of ourselves to some degree and see what's going on, everything changes. And the pain and the fear of the change begin to dissolve, and we can actually we can be proactive about it. So what can we expect? Venus in Virgo is going to attract experiences, as I said, that will bring our attention to our relationship with ourselves, and hence to everybody else, because our relationship with ourselves is what we then overlay on every other relationship in our lives. We don't love ourselves, we attract people who will not love us either. If we, and we're all somewhere on a sliding scale with this. It's I don't know that any of us love ourselves unconditionally, but it's the parts of ourselves that we're not aware of, that's what we have to find out. The work will be about how we feel about ourselves and the values that we hold on to, and where our priorities lie. What are our priorities? What's really important to us? And is this what we're following? This is Venus, and this is Venus in Virgo. This is the purification, the cleansing. This is the rebuilding. This is the new structure, the Capricorn. What's really important? This is the second house Taurus. What's really important, and are we committed to it? Juno. Insecurity and lack of faith in oneself can emerge. We can feel that way, and it's okay. We have to give ourselves enough bandwidth, enough wiggle room to fail, to have made mistakes. This is a soul school. We're not supposed to be perfect. We have to recognize that we are imperfect, and then when we can come to terms with that, then we can begin to change. It's when we think that we're so perfect and everything is just working so well that we get into trouble. Perhaps something that we have ignored or denied will create guilt, and we'll feel, and it'll be unearthed. And in consort with Mars, we can extend this remorse and regret for choices and actions that we've taken, perhaps instinctively, without any consideration. In other words, we can be instinctive about it. We can act. We don't have to get hung up necessarily in all the emotional baggage of it. We can recognize, what needs to be done. We can be pretty objective about it from a very, mental Virgo kind of perspective, and just take action and say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. Make a plan and work it. How can we make the most of it? Venus is what's essential to us and essential to our survival. Mars correlates to the choices that we make according to those priorities. Pisces is our spiritual connection, but Virgo is the daily practice. So, we have the connection, we study astrology, we do the work, but, what do we do every day? How do we meet the world? How do we meet other people? How do we meet ourselves? And do we actually have a structured practice in our lives that keeps us on track, something that we've put in place that, that endures and sustains? The cycle will generate the circumstances and relationships that facilitate the healing that is found to be needed in the form of practitioners, medicines, and healing modalities. Mars in Virgo is a great time to find healing, to find other practitioners, to go for acupuncture, go for any kind of body work, and any of the anything that you need, any of the alternative healing arts or anything naturopathic. Very, very good time to do it. Essential oils, crystals. Just allow yourself to be open to different possibilities of finding those frequencies and those energies to balance what it is within your own energetic framework that needs to be balanced. And if our work is about feeling wounded or discomfort physically or otherwise, the remedies can always be found in the direction of self-care and self-responsibility. And again, that's we have this enormous, almost ponderous South Node transit right now of Saturn and Pluto, and this is what it's telling us, that we're the ones we've been waiting for. We can't expect that every time we fall down, somebody else is going to come and fix us. We have to learn to take care of ourselves. Sure, we're all going to fly in an airplane and probably catch a cold or the flu or something, but we have to make ourselves as strong as we possibly can, physically, emotionally, mentally, and spiritually. It's the only way we're going to get through this. And this is the commitment that each one of us has to make to ourselves. Maybe maybe some of us don't want to get through it, but if you do, that's the work that needs to be done. This is a quote from Paulo Coelho. I just love this. Love is not to be found in someone else, but in ourselves. We simply awaken it. But in order to do that, we need the other person. The universe only makes sense when we have someone to share our feelings with. And that's what I'd like to send you guys all out with, is to understand that we're not alone. And the first part of the reconnection is to reconnect with somebody else, reconnect with somebody in your world, and begin to go outside of yourself. Thank you. So, does anybody have any questions, or any about anything that I said that's not clear? I know that I sometimes talk too fast. Anything that anybody has to add or detract or has to say, please, now's the time.
Hi, Daniel.
Hi.
I was just what I was thinking of. Can the Pisces Virgo axis, which can also include the 12th and the 6th house, can that also be the like, say, looking at it maybe in a bit more practical way? Because sometimes when you say spiritual connection, for some, that kind of loses people. Could that be the visions and the dreams that we have, and then the Virgo 6th house is how you implement the steps that you
Yes. Yeah, sure, absolutely. Yeah, that's a great example. Absolutely, because we can have the dream, and if the dream evaporates in the night and we don't still hold on to it in the morning, then it's gone completely. But when we do remember it, or if it's a waking dream, then we have to bring it down to earth. We have to ground it, and that's that's the Chiron Virgo. I think I think the Chiron actually is the ruler of Virgo. Because it's hands-on. Virgo was a hands-on dynamic. Get your hands dirty in Virgo. And that's where the work gets done. And we have to take these dreams, these visions, these impulses, if you would, these inspirations, the stuff that comes to us, by its own volition. That's Uranus. That trine from Uranus is, we're going to be getting these hits. We're going to be getting downloads, and besides Pisces, that again, we have to work with it. We have to not deny it or dismiss and say, oh, that's so far out of left field, I can't do that. See, that's the Virgo thing. We say, I'm not good enough to do that, or I'm not ready to do that, or it won't work, or nobody's done that before, so it must be stupid, or you know what I'm saying? We have to get past all that resistance that we put up to having those inspirations, and that's also part of Virgo. We've got to turn that Virgo around and say, no, this really makes sense to me. This is this is really a solid idea, and yeah, I'm going to do it, and I'm going to just take it step by step and do it. Does that make sense?
Oh, definitely. I'm a Virgo rising just like you, so and have a planet in the sixth, so I'm definitely familiar with that.
Yeah.
I had another thought. Since we have Saturn and Pluto in Capricorn, to me that seems like it's energizing the Uranus-Neptune conjunction that happened in the 90s. Could this Mars-Virgo, I know it's a bit far out from the actual conjunction of the 60s, but it kind of seems like to me this might sort of re-energize that energy as well, because we are still within that cycle.
Tell me again the two transits.
What I was thinking is that the Saturn Pluto in Capricorn
right.
Seems like to me it's energizing the Uranus Neptune conjunction that happened in the 90s.
Oh, okay, all right.
So what I was thinking is that maybe this Venus Mars conjunction will kind of energize, maybe bring to the fore what happened in the 60s.
Well, yeah, there's no question that these cycles all clearly unfold one into the other. We can't isolate any of it and say that whatever's happening had nothing to do with what came before, because it's all built on what came before. If those things hadn't happened in that order, then we would be having different experiences today. There's cycles within cycles. Saturn and Neptune. Is that what you asked me? I'm sorry. Saturn and Neptune in the 90s.
Uranus Neptune.
Uranus Neptune. I'm sorry. Well, yeah, I'm thinking Saturn because it's the traditional rule of Aquarius. Uranus Neptune is, perhaps what has happened, to the world in the last 20 or 30 years, where our belief system has become fragmented or polarized, or it becomes individualized. Uranus and Aquarius is a very polarizing dynamic, and it's really part of what's happening today. I think that the Uranus-Pluto square that just passed is part of the reason that our world is so split up, because as everybody becomes more individuated, they become more separate to some degree. That Aquarius, like-minded souls, doesn't mean everybody's in the same boat. Everybody's in their own boat, and is only looking for the people who are a really close match. So we end up with a lot of different personalities that don't necessarily mesh. And it's why, especially in this country, we're seeing this incredible polarization of us versus them, regardless of which side you're on. It's only going to get worse, only going to get worse, especially when Pluto moves into Aquarius. The Saturn-Pluto, I think in some ways maybe is, they also don't get along very well. I mean, Saturn and Pluto, really don't get along. But what's happening is that there's at least some structure. There's something that's being created. There's something solid that's appearing as a result. And like I said, we're creating new things are coming into our reality, even as a lot of this old stuff is just being dissolved and being trashed, being torn down. So it's the process really is twofold. It's not just everything going away, but it's also a birthing. And I don't know that the dynamic is that similar, Wanda. Maybe I'm not seeing something that you see, but I think that they do work, in coordination to a degree, because they're all catalyzing to some degree. They're all, Uranus Neptune is really going to really it brought us the internet, for one thing, among other things. And that internet did bring us global community, but it also brought us everything that was associated with all the diversity and all the conflicts of that global community. Does that kind of make sense?
Yes.
I don't know that I can really synthesize the two into a single paragraph. I think they're two different dynamics happening at different levels, and they're both pretty deep, because one's Neptune, one's Pluto. But clearly they're working in concert, in coordination.
Well, I guess I was looking at the breakdown of the structures that basically have individuals, that basically says that the individual person is less than, which of course is always, correlated with the Virgo archetype, and also the push for, things like Medicare for all, and the other type things that help the little person, that help the working person.
Right.
So I guess that's why I was looking at, the Venus Mars maybe helping to initiate that, process of working together, and that, the little person is just as part of the whole. We've always kind of looked at the whole, but the whole is made up of the small parts, and if the small parts are messed up, the whole's going to be messed up. So I was looking at Venus Mars, maybe kind of energizing and helping that, we, like you said, we all got to work together, because we're all in the same boat.
I think they're happening on two different levels. I think that the outer planets are working, really below the surface, and for the most part, most of us, or most people are not aware of that going on. They feel the movement, they feel pressure, but they don't know why. I think the Mars-Venus stuff is much closer to home. I think this is where this is where our the membrane, if you would, between the individual and the collective really exists, where these influences that are happening outside and happening globally begin to permeate our world, our lives, but it's where the change begins to occur, because when everybody begins to have different values and different priorities and makes different choices, then the way that we are individuating collectively and treating each other collectively is going to change. So, it's kind of like happening, it's like the ocean, we've got the deep water, and then we've got, the surface waves. So, the deep water is definitely churning up a lot of material and a lot of activity, but only so that, you know, the waves can take it and bring it ashore, so to speak. I don't know if that's a perfect analogy, but you understand what I'm saying? So that it can come into our awareness, because we can't really perceive the outer planets directly. We get it all through, you know, Mercury, Venus, and Mars. That's how it all comes to us. In one form, it comes to us through our physical body, or our mental body, or our emotional body. We don't learn it any other way. Does that make sense?
Yes, somewhat it does. I guess because I have that outer planet energy, I see it from that perspective. So
Yeah. Well,
yes,
we all do. All of us here do. I mean, that's why we're here. But it's the inner planets that really, you know, is the day-to-day kind of stuff that, you know, it's when Uranus is on your Venus, or when Uranus is on your moon. You know, Uranus by itself isn't, and maybe I'm more wrong with this, but you know, it has to it has to contact in some way an inner planet for you, by house, sign, aspect, you know, polarity. Somehow there has to be an influence there for you to feel it. And I don't mean you personally, I mean us to feel it. Right? It's all in the inner planets. Again, that's just my opinion.
Okay, thanks, Wanda. We have a comment from Sheila. Go ahead, Sheila.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
Okay, hi.
Hi,
So,
Sheila Jean.
hi. I have a stellium under the beams of the sun, and it seems to me, what it feels like to me is that my soul decided that I could get distracted too many ways, and that it needed to have the energy of all those planets tightly directed.
It's interesting. What are the planets?
Well, I really have a lot. I have, it's at, my sun's at 5.18 Virgo, and then Kazimi is Bacchus, and then Combust is my vertex, and then you get into Leo, and the first one is, I use some asteroids, Persephone, followed by Mercury, followed by Pluto, followed by Ceres, and Ceres is partile conjunct Mars. So all of that runs between 5.18 Virgo and 19.2 Leo.
Okay.
All of it.
And where's the sun?
The sun is at 5.18 Virgo.
All right. So they're not all under the beams.
They're not? Because see, I go 17 degrees.
Oh, okay. If you go 17, then they are. I work with 15 degrees. Um, yeah, I mean, it's clearly a really interesting constellation. And I think that, you know, clearly if you lived with your whole life, you probably have a pretty good handle on how it is manifested. Um,
Yes.
Yeah, I have to admit, Sheila Jean, that I am not an expert under the beams. I have really, it's only in the my recent work that I have really started to look at this Hellenistic material, and I really can't pull from a lot of charts to tell you about it. And my partner has Mercury, Cazimi, Uranus, and you know, that's really what piqued my interest, because it affects her sleep. You know, she's also got a third house Neptune. So, you know, but
So
you know,
really
it's never.
intuitive.
Hmm?
Really
So,
intuitive.
well, it's not just intuitive. It's like she'll lose words, and you know, one sentence will become another sentence. It's like there's sometimes a disconnect in her speech, that, you know, because the thoughts come to her so fast that
Right.
that she can't finish the first sentence. She's already got the second sentence coming out of her head. So, but you know, this is the kind of thing that happens. I think it's different for everybody. Um, it clearly indicates that there's a pressure there, and I think pressure is the right word. on it. And I think pressure is a word that I use a lot with some of these conjunctions, and with some of these stressful. Even a trine can be pressure, and that pressure. We have a tendency to see everything as positive or negative, or we like it or we dislike it, and the world's just not that way. Sometimes trines can really mess us up, and sometimes that T-square is the best thing in our chart. So, we can't go by this traditional understanding of what these things mean. And I'm prone to agree with you that tremendous concentration of dynamics is a focus, that it really has pulled you in and helped you to focus on one particular part, area of your life, or one particular, part of yourself, to the exclusion perhaps of some other things, and that's okay. Is that kind of how it has worked?
Yes, and if you look at the pattern of my whole chart, it kind of looks like a bow and arrow, pointing at the north node, which is conjunct the ascendant. So, yes, it's like, okay, you're shot in this direction, and this is the way you're going to go.
Right. And it's clearly towards self-actualization. So, it's all good. It's really all good. And it's why we can't have these preconceived notions, that, planet in a certain house or a certain sign is good or bad. It just doesn't work that way, because it really has to do with the consciousness of the person that's brought to the chart and how they work with that. And, Jeffrey always said, it's the squares and oppositions that move us forward. The trines make us, catch potatoes. So these challenging dynamics in our chart are good, and it's why we are who we are.
Thank you. I've enjoyed this.
Thank you.
Okay, Daniel, that brings us to the end of your meeting. Thank you so much from all of us. Would you all please thank Daniel Fiverson, everyone?
Thank you, Daniel. Very interesting. Thank you, Daniel. Brilliant as usual.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you. It's my pleasure to see you all. Thank you.
That was really fun.
Thank you.